Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this podcast and cluing in, and maybe even thinking about asking some questions for us later on. I'm here with Pam, and she's going to tell you in a few minutes what she does. And um, this is not working. And anyway, let's run with it. So she's going to tell us a little bit more what she does and what kind of problems she solves. And I'm really looking forward to hearing her talk and sharing all her neat experiences. So, welcome, Pam, and thank you for joining me at the Create a Legacy podcast series or show, whatever you want to call it. So, welcome.
Thank you.
So, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about what you do and some of the horrors or some of the fun experiences you've had.
It's funny because some of the horrors are what got me here. I think from trauma comes meaning, right? So,
Right.
so there's really nothing that I look back on with regret. But
Yeah.
uh, I actually have the luxury of working at the intersection of business and behaviors
Mm-hmm.
because I used to be a banker, and then
Okay.
child of the '80s, we were
Yep.
gonna have it all and Bonfire of the Vanities and all that, and or graduated undergrad in the '80s. And since then, I found my way over into my grad studies are in psychology, corporate behaviors, and
Mm-hmm.
positive psychology. And I really wanted to understand how people could be themselves at work. It just
Right.
seemed so obvious to me that that would be a goal, but it was much harder. The path was just an interesting, a lot of buzzwords and idealistic hopes and dreams that I thought, really, so I set out to find what well-being in the workplace would look like. And after looking at engagement and culture and all these other buzzwords,
Right.
I found my way to inclusion, and
Mm-hmm.
the idea that inclusion meant that you were
Right.
engaged in a part of the culture and that you belonged,
Right.
and all of that.
Mhm.
And I suppose, now I sit quite squarely in the diversity and inclusion space. Very happy.
Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm glad that you found the space for you in which you can fit and also still help people because like you were saying, we have all these buzzwords, jargon words, and what do they really mean? You know, I remember when I first started my podcast, I interviewed this guy because I sort of knew him, and he was talking about bias. And I guess I'm just pure ignorant. I had no idea what bias meant. And he kept talking about his jargon words because that's what he does in his work. And I finally had to say to him, I says, I'm sorry, but I don't understand what bias is. What is it? And he was kind of like, what? You don't know? And later I went and looked up in the dictionary. Okay, what does this mean? And oh, it's just an opinion.
It is. It is.
So anyway, it's interesting just about like you were saying, words that people use to describe what they do, and I'm glad that it works for you, that the inclusion is a good thing for you and it works for you. So that's great. But
It's true.
yeah,
And it's interesting because one of the things that I find in terms of the idealistic hopes and dreams of everybody,
right,
that when you get into something like bias is just a distraction. It's just
right,
an irrelevant piece of information that, whether true, like when you think about how you believe someone is and your negative thoughts about them or whatever, that is an irrelevant part of decision making. It's not real in terms of factors, right
mhm,
this minute about that person. You're making some assumptions that are quite dangerous, and they're usually done in microseconds. And so inclusion
mhm,
is one of those places where when you go in and you try to tame or manage bias,
mhm,
we're talking about something so big, so
Right.
complex, infinite numbers of biases that don't come at you one at a time. It's not like you are a woman and you are a race of whichever and you are a, it's like it all comes together. And I might really just not hang out with you because you like pizza and I don't. Like, it
Yeah.
just could be anything. So I find that when we get into those moments where we expect perfection, we expect world peace,
Hmm.
we expect, everybody will just get along and then we'll get to work together. I think we miss the point because one of the ideas of that is sort of like a social evolution. And the word evolution, just today, I was looking into women in the workplace because one of the biggest diversity issues is women in leadership for a lot of reasons that's necessary. Gender is in every one of them, race,
Right.
sex, all of the have gender. So that seems to be the place to use as a lens and inclusion. And more women have left the workplace in COVID for you. I mean, it's probably no
Right.
surprise, with all of the schooling and the craziness and the fact that they were already feeling overly judged and had to do their job twice as well and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but what's so interesting is I was looking at that and how we were going to sort of, go backwards in a way. All that we had done from 2015 to 2020 would just leave us and we'd be back a step or five or 10. Um, and the math has us in the next 200 years, if we go at this
Hmm.
pace of change. And I thought, that is what we're dealing with in the world of inclusion, trying to have this lengthy, tired, long, we got the vote 100 years ago, at least white women. I have to say
Right.
that because it's not everybody.
Hmm.
And we don't have the vote in the boardroom now, and they say 200 more years. This is not the way we play the game. So those
Right.
buzzwords are idealistic and hopeful and optimistic and wonderful, but world peace before we work together is an impossibility.
Hmm.
So my banking brain kicks
Right.
in, and I
Hmm.
think about the idea that you need, as you look at everybody out in the streets protesting injustice, right? Every single person wants something called justice.
Right.
Everyone, in the workplace, at home, in the police,
Hmm.
to the way that we're policed, the way that we're, our politicians. So I think about it, and I believe that the evolution is something that we're all on. But
Hmm.
if we tear apart the idea of social justice and organizational justice, for example, then
Right.
we stay in that evolutionary state and continue to heal racial divides and
Hmm.
continue to find the gender roles that make the most sense and the fluidity and all of that. But if we stay there and wait for that world peace, the system just bangs on. There's another recruiter, another
Yeah.
person recruited in, another promotion, another white middle-aged man makes it to the boardroom. And if that's going to happen, then we need to peel them apart, let one be evolutionary, and
Hmm.
then come into the one system, the organizational system, and get revolutionary.
Hmm.
Say, what are we missing? Well, the banker in me knew that it had to be measurable
Hmm.
because the organization
Yeah.
is not a human being. It's a system of goals to make money
Right.
or to save lives, if or to whatever the output is, or the what you want out of the whatever you're compensated by
Right.
in your if military or
Yeah.
medical
The
establishment.
ultimate goal. Yeah.
I think what you need is you need to understand a transparent way to level the playing field inside that system. And
Hmm.
so we were not measuring the diversity of our mindsets, the
Hmm.
diversity of how we all come together and many minds give a better solution. We were just saying, let's all look differently.
Right.
And that I figured if we could hold over there, put that into the social justice realm, but come into the organization and say, look, how do you work? What kind of innovator are you? Not can you, but what
Right.
kind are you? What kind are you? Let's mix them all around and learn to talk to each other.
Right.
You begin to reduce the bias because you're talking about a it's less personal. You're not talking about me, you're talking about what I do. You're talking about how I work.
Right.
And when we look at that from a strengths-based way, we can organize a team no matter what they look like around their inclusive performance.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that when I bring in someone
Mm-hmm.
of another race, or if you want to play out all the intersectionalities, I would bring in a 65-year-old one-armed, you know trans male from whatever it
Yeah.
is, all the various beautiful intersectionalities.
Right.
But I'm bringing that person in because they innovate the way we don't, and we
Right.
need that person.
Right.
So imagine sitting there and thinking, oh my gosh, we've just innovated this next step and the client's loving it, and we're making more and more and more of whatever widgets we create. And then we look at each other and I say, oh, I didn't know you were gay, or I didn't know. Wouldn't that be awesome to like be bonded around what it was we were brought together to do?
Right.
And what my clients see is that when that happens, when they are organized around the inclusive performance, that's not all you do. You want to get
Right.
along in many other ways, right? I asked the question 6 months, a year, 18 months later to my clients, and they said, when for example, most recently, when the Black Lives Matter protest, it was the white, uh, colleague that
Yeah.
said, let's go. We got to do something about this, because they had bonded as people
Right.
around that performance.
Right.
And that person wanted to do something for his colleague. And
Mm-hmm.
that was not a person that would have normally been out on the street doing that. So I
Right.
think there's something really important about understanding, not just saying, okay, everybody be nice to everybody, but to say, let's see how we can utilize the best of everybody to
Right.
get this done.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, by the way, there's some other stuff we might want to know about each other.
Right.
It
Mhm.
just, it seems silly now, but that flip makes a huge difference. Sorry,
Right.
I
Right.
went off on my soapbox.
Oh, it's good. Soapboxes are good. Soapboxes are good.
Well, it's
It just
definitely
shows
one.
you how passionate you are about it, and
It,
how much um, ba- um, empowerment you feel about talking and doing it. I can experience that. I feel that from you. So tell us now, since you've given a little bit of history about yourself and you're a former banker. So tell us, how'd you decide to do into the inclusion and that type of thing in the workplace? How'd you
well,
decide to
yeah,
get in there?
it was really interesting because I would have maybe a couple of years ago said, well, I went to study this and found out that and learned that. But you know what? Really, I have to put it all the way back to my when I graduated undergrad and I was working in the finance world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I found my way to, well, long story short, I ended up going to Russia right after the wall had come down,
Yeah.
and I was working um, in a group of finance and accounting people at Deloitte, and then to Price Waterhouse, and we were sent to Siberia. So
Mm-hmm.
I was in my 20s. I went to Siberia, and I stayed for you go for a few weeks, they said, and it
Yeah.
ended up in 3 months, and then 6 months, and then a year, and then I signed on for three. One of those. But it was fabulous
Yeah.
because it was like we were on an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And there were days, let me just say, Siberia is a very interesting place to live for a couple of years. But
Yeah.
then I was in Moscow for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I would say what allowed me to become who I am anyway is changing from saying, instead of saying why, I found myself saying why not, because
Right.
there were no Joneses to keep up with.
Right.
And so I was whatever I was, and when I took the next step, it was me taking the next step, and sometimes it was hard.
Right.
I really had a sense of true vision about what my next step was going to be, and I wasn't just sort of following the sort
Yeah.
of normal trajectory of a entry level person moving to here to there to there to there to there.
Mm-hmm.
I would something would happen. Of course, there weren't enough people to do everything in Russia. It was like, well, okay, why not? And okay, why not? And okay, why not? And I had this broad understanding of business and people.
Mm-hmm.
And I started putting the puzzle pieces together and thinking, there's just something really interesting, 80s to 90s, 90s to, 2000s, about how people sort of separate their work and their life,
Mm-hmm.
as if work is work.
Mm-hmm.
And you wanted out of that as quickly as possible to get out into life. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that everybody hated their job, but it was
Yeah.
just an interesting pull.
Right.
And I don't know that I would have seen that had I not let go of the Joneses and been in some crazy, position to say, well, all right, why not? Way too many times, because
Mm-hmm.
I got a giant picture really early in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
That
So
was
when
one.
did you come back to North America to kind of do what you're doing now?
Fairly recently, I've tried 3 big times to come back to the States, and in
Mm-hmm.
those periods, I'd be here for quite some time and go
Yeah.
back. I split my time, most of my adult life, between China and Russia, with
Okay.
some time that I spent in England. So those 3 places were really my home
Mm-hmm.
most of my adult life. And I found my way to America in chunks, a few months here, a few months there, a few months there, a couple of years. And then I tried to make the move, but it was very difficult because I had, you know, I wasn't really sure how to do this in America,
Right.
because I had not grown up as an adult in the whole space of knowing how does competition work? What do you do? How do you sell? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Chinese, so when I stand up, people listen. Whether it was right or not, I didn't really know how to market myself here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been quite a journey. It was hard, but I believe this now that I'm here and really able to tap into my network, I believe I finally did it. I think
Oh, okay.
I'm basing myself in the States now. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel
Okay.
home now.
You feel home now. So when's your next adventure? Are you leaving again?
Whoa, COVID really did me in, because I
Yeah.
was so used to traveling.
Yeah.
I have never gone this long without feeling jet lagged. I don't know.
Yeah.
China and Russia would be an interesting place. I just don't think that that's in the cards in an immediate way.
Right.
Um, England would be, of course, but honestly, I have to say the clients that I'm working with now are all different sizes and all different views of diversity and inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a can-do spirit about it. Even post COVID, it's sort
Mm-hmm.
of the reentry is going to be tough, but I think that this I don't want to diminish COVID, because
Mm-hmm.
it was a really tough time for a lot of people, and I don't,
Yeah.
myself included. You've seen
Mm-hmm.
the 1 bedroom flat I've been in for a year. But I think what happened for me is it just allowed me to sit with um, my what I do, and put some of it digitally, put
Mm-hmm.
it out there, and I can help more people.
Right.
And when I put together the idea that there were just some resignation, it was just like, this is crazy. We might as well think differently. And more people, then I feel like this is just coming to be an amazing spot,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm now doing a mastermind on organizational justice, where I don't have to go into the client and just have this
Right.
period of time with them. I can talk to cohorts of people that want to know more about it, and sort of guide them through the process of finding that place where inclusion can become a business model, not an
Right.
initiative. I
Right.
want people to be able to predict their business by the diversity that they bring in.
Right.
That's the only way it'll be sustainable. And I can do that with more people here in the
Mhm.
States.
Yeah.
This digital face, if you
Yeah.
will, and I feel like I've just been honored to be with a lot of very varied clients that
Right.
are diverse clients that are
Yeah.
looking at it so beautifully, and it's I'm learning a lot from them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool because, you
Yeah.
know, I was doing a business totally different than I'm doing now, but um, it was kind of like, okay, time to pivot. What are you going to do? And I was just talking with a gal who I used to work with a long time ago when I started hard at work. And and I just said to her, yeah, I just said it's time to go back to the kindness business. And so it was just kind of funny. And she says, yeah, isn't it one of those businesses that you just kind of go back to? It always speaking to you. And I said, yeah, I don't know what some days I don't know what it really looks like and what I'm doing, but you know, I get to have the opportunity to pivot. I get to have the opportunity of having conversations with so many people, especially with a podcast, you know, to talk to people and listen to them and see where how they are landed now. Like, and do they regret, you know, being had to pivot, or do they regret, or what did they change in their business so that it still flourishes for them? You know, so there's so many interesting things, you know. So for me, it's just I always like meeting people, and I've always been a good networker. So I'm just doing it differently. I'm doing online one-on-one, you know, and I do the conferences too, but they're all virtual, you know, as well. So you know, it's sort of just learning to find out what you like, what would you really like to do, and just do it. Like you were saying, not
Right.
why, but why not, you know.
And
Uh,
I think you're like me because when I hear you tell that story, what I love about it is that it never goes away from you. The heart
Right.
at work, which I think is
Yeah.
a great, that phrase, just I love it because hard at work and heart at work, just it's like it's got that beautiful pivot in,
Right.
how it's said. But I think what's so interesting, a lot of people have said, "Oh my gosh, do you hate that you were a banker? Do you look back and regret it you were a banker?" And I think I didn't forget banking.
Yeah.
I couldn't hold my own if I went into the field right now, but
Yeah.
I know I have a business acumen
Right.
around my behavioral, sense of this.
Mhm.
And I think what I do is I just add, it's like a confluence of
Mhm.
everything. And
Right.
I think that the way that you tell your story, it sounds like it's never not with you, and it
Mhm.
is you, and it's a confluence of everything that you experience, even when you're not focusing directly on that.
Yeah.
Still in the back of your mind, you keep the pieces of the puzzle together.
Right. Well, it's just like you know, your banking background has an influence on you on how you present and how you can actually help people, but you're just using a different tool set or a different viewpoint about being more inclusive at work, you know, or how can you incorporate that?
Absolutely. And with your take on it as legacy,
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is everyone has a confluence of
Mhm.
whatever. It's what
Yeah.
you studied, what you lived, who you are, what your family taught you, what your friends know about you and taught you.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is if you don't give the gift that you're supposed to give the world, the legacy,
Yeah.
then you will.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it's the banking side of me is a
Mhm.
wonderful thing, but I don't think that makes me superior to some other person. It
Right.
just makes me me, and I think they have some other confluence of their legal side and
Mhm.
corporate side together, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be two industries. It's
Right.
the
Different
my
backgrounds.
mother was a musician, is a musician, and my father was an accountant.
Right.
So the idea of that, everyone's gift together is what you know
Mhm.
the legacy has to go on. So I
Right.
think it'd be terrible if someone didn't give their gift.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what kind of clients do you have some stories or something of clients you've worked with and some challenges you've had to overcome with them?
Yeah, lots, lots. It's funny because I was talking about this the other day, and I was speaking to a group of people that were talking about racial healing, and I don't always go into what I call the depth of the diversity.
Right?
I mean, gender maybe because I can speak to the women, women's organizations and things like that.
Yeah.
But uh, because when I was in China, it was the Japanese and Chinese. There were very different
Right.
racial just conversations going on. And so when I came back to the United States and saw that these conversations were going on, I cared quite a lot, and
Right.
I'm also not,
Yeah.
able to understand the Black community as much as I wish I could. The interesting thing for me was that I was hearing the pain in a very different way, how they had uh, felt and whether it be anger or upset or disappointment, and then some beautiful, lovely emotions as well. But this combination of all of that, and I was so lucky to be there because I heard all of that and realized that especially in the United States, maybe,
Hmm.
there's an emotionality to so much of everyone's identity,
Hmm.
right? So whether it's race or the LGBT community, LGBTQ community,
Yeah.
any of that um, uh, part of your life that has had whatever amount of pain that
Hmm.
makes you makes you feel excluded rather than
Right.
included, um, is very, very important to
Hmm.
understand and to heal and to come together, and that's that whole evolutionary thing. But I don't think I was ready for the emotionality around it.
Okay.
I understood the stories that I heard, or I shouldn't say understood, but I heard and
Yeah.
absorbed and took in all the stories that I heard, and the emotionality was so amazingly heavy.
Mm.
And I just feel so there were times when I felt burdened by that, and
Mm.
I should have felt burdened by that because
Yeah.
I want to help. What I think I find with my clients is when you think about the person inside of the organization,
Hmm.
they're dealing with the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter and the Asian violence and all of that. It's not There's not just one.
Right.
All of the people are coming out from the streets into the office building with their souls crushed.
Right.
And it really was an amazing thing for me to realize how deeply that went. So one of the things that I talk about when I go into my clients is just how to do what I said, how to separate the idea of what is in control of your
Right.
diversity program and what is not.
Right.
You can transparently have those conversations and go as far and as deep and as careful as you possibly can, but then to say, and this is how we're going to take the next step. It's a
Right.
big lesson about moving forward.
Right.
So I found a really good home for my mindset diversity because if you think about, I think back to, what my grandmother might have told me,
Yeah.
if you go to the playground and you see a child that's different than you, she'd say, well, find a game you can both play, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going into these organizations and I'm saying, yes, there's pain, and yes, you need to talk about it, and yes, you need to have these big, bold conversations. And in the meantime, come in and do the mindset diversity, organize
Mhm.
everybody around the one thing they all have in common, the
Right.
work, and it starts to settle down.
Hmm.
So emotionality was a giant, it doesn't even matter the size of the company,
Yeah.
a small company of 50 people, a giant company of 100,000 people,
Right.
it's there to
Yeah.
whatever level, and it hurts.
Hmm.
So it really struck me, you know, really struck me. So I have had a hard time in COVID, uh, you know, for different reasons than you and different
Right.
reasons than someone else, but I find that it's sort of, if you tack on top of the emotionality, the COVID reentry, it's
Hmm.
going to be really, really tough.
Right.
And I want to be ready for that
Hmm.
because it was a shock when I first got here.
Right.
A big
Right.
shock.
Yeah. And I'm sure that many companies will love to have your support and understanding and helping them direct the traffic, if you will, uh,
Yeah,
to incorporate. They know what they have to do, but they just don't know how. And so it's so great that you are available to help them um, to put it all together. You know,
it's a pleasure to
it's
do.
like each person is a piece of puzzle, right? And you have to put it
Exactly.
together. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think we cannot separate the idea that
Right.
there's major pressure that people are under, and then there's also the diversity program.
Right.
It's not as if they're separate because they're in the hearts and minds of the people. So
Right.
as you're going about your diversity and inclusion efforts, you're also mitigating pressure. You're
Right.
also trying to get the work done. You're also trying to get, engagement up. You're also
Right.
trying to get whatever. So you can't separate all of the different HR initiatives and pretend you're focusing on culture.
Yeah.
And then it's all in the hearts and minds of the
Yeah.
one person, which is why I think inclusion is touches it all, right?
Mhm.
And so I think of, I sort of shape the, how the org chart usually looks like a bunch of lines that go
Yeah.
from top to bottom. I sort of think of diversity and inclusion together. I
Yeah.
call it inclusive diversity. I flip
Right.
it. I believe that is leadership, that is culture, that is engagement, there's an element of each one of the pieces of the team that you're
Hmm.
building that goes through the lens of inclusive diversity.
Right.
So it makes you were talking about the clients that I could help. When I started putting things on digital and doing the masterminds,
Yeah.
it dawned on me that there was a way, if we used it as a lens, to make everything simpler.
Right.
Doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it quick all the time.
Yeah.
It makes it simpler.
Right.
You're taking this step and then you're taking that step,
Hmm.
and that's what you're meant to get out of that, and
Yeah.
then you're taking this step, and it's a measurable and meaningful path that is just simple. And right now we need simple because
Yeah, I think people are pretty overwhelmed and burnt out. And so the simpler things are for people to embrace or um, willing to experience or jump into, right?
absolutely. It's
Yeah.
hard. Everybody's having a hard time. And it's
Right.
not as if the diversity leader,
Hmm.
they're not skipping down the aisle, to the top, and so I want for everyone it just to be a little simpler. And I think with some transparency and a little bit of this one set of extra quick survey measures, what ends up happening is people have their own language to pivot, their own language to mitigate stress, their
Right.
own language to be inclusive, so that it's no one person's responsibility to herd the cats into the
Right.
basket. And I think that it has to it has to
Includes
be.
everybody.
Oh, and it has to be
Yeah.
imperfect and human and intentional and impactful. And we need to be able to pivot in and out of our behavioral stuff
Right.
too,
Right.
right?
Yeah, we all have changes to make.
Huge. And we're all, I mean, what is it? There's a bunch of quotes where they say, assume everybody, you can't assume that that person, you don't know what they've been through in their
Yeah.
life or yesterday or this morning. So
Yeah.
um, be kind, which I
Yeah.
think is
Yeah.
what
Yeah. Just
inclusion
be nice to somebody. You never know what they've gone through or going through at that moment in time.
is,
Yeah.
especially these days.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit how if they want to work with you and what kind of people do you like to work with?
I love people, and so it would be hard to find somebody that I didn't enjoy. I tell you, the person that just, I can't get enough of is the
Yeah.
person that is open
Hmm.
to um, I was about to say why not,
Yeah.
right? The person that is open to um, moving out of the buzzword bingo that we're playing. Like it's hard sometimes
Mm,
because we might get paid to send 30 people to leadership training, and that's a lovely thing. But if somebody can step outside of their role and look at it and give it just a real, is this working kind of,
yeah.
couple questions, um, then I think it's fun to explore just at the
Mhm,
edges of some of that. So I do really appreciate somebody who's open. And I also appreciate leaders um, who want to be a part of it.
mhm,
They don't just delegate it down to HR and
yeah.
say it's your responsibility, because bless their hearts, they cannot do it alone. As
Mhm,
they can get, their activities, they can't do it alone. So I really enjoy the open, collaborative kind of
mhm,
cultures. But these days, it's really, really hard to find people that are, that can stay there for long. So, I am so willing to help anyone that needs it, and
right,
we'll get there together. Is the
right,
answer.
right. So cool. So cool. So it's been great chatting with you, Pam, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed our conversations and your passion and your excitement for what you do. So I know that that is, in itself is creating an impactful legacy. And so thank you for sharing yours. And
Uh,
look forward to chatting with you again another time. Very soon.
Please, it would be my
Maybe we'll
pleasure.
do another podcast another time. Catch
Oh,
up. Let's find
well,
out where you are now.
I would love it. Yeah, because after COVID, who knows what'll happen when I
Yeah.
leave the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. And I know if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to you on podcast.heartatworkonline.org, and your page will be there and they can reach out to you there. And also below the video, they'll find more information about you, Pam, as well. I love your last name, Teagarden. Oh,
Oh, well, thank you.
sounds peaceful.
It wasn't so great when I was 7, because you TT in your garden until you're about 9, and then
Yeah.
you're okay. But but no, I hope on the page as well, I've offered everyone an ebook on what organizational justice is. I hope anyone that wants
Yeah.
to will read that. But what a pleasure to meet you and to be a
Yeah.
part of this. Thank you for having me.
No, you're so welcome, Pam. You're so welcome. Okay, take care. And in final notes, always be kind to each other because that's all we have is each other. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.